Eleanor Hawthorne stood barefoot on her front porch, steam curling from her mug of hibiscus tea as the morning sun spilled gold across her yard. Her wild garden, once a neatly trimmed HOA-approved plot, had transformed over the past 3 months into a living tapestry. Tall grasses rustled in soft waves. Milkweed and coneflowers painted the space with colour, and butterflies arrived each morning like clockwork, dancing on the breeze. But this morning was different. She could hear it, a subtle sound, not quite wind, not quite bees, brushed past her ears, as though the blades of grass whispered among themselves. She stepped off the porch, toes brushing the cool, dew-slicked earth. As if responding, a single monarch butterfly floated toward her, circling once, then landing on her shoulder with almost deliberate calm. Eleanor blinked. That's when she saw the envelope. It was tucked under the edge of her welcome mat, bearing the official logo of the Hillgrove Estates HOA, heavy cream-coloured paper, red ink stamp, notice of violation, lawn height non-compliance. She opened it with trembling fingers. Your lawn has exceeded the maximum allowed grass height of 6 inches, as per Section 3.4 of the HOA Residential Maintenance Standards. Your current estimated average, 8.7 inches. You are hereby fined $200, effective immediately. Non-compliance beyond 10 days will result in escalated action, including potential liens. A bitter laugh escaped her. 8.7 inches. The note might as well have said, "We noticed your joy, and we'd like you to remove it." Eleanor turned back to her yard. Bees buzzed softly through the goldenrod. Finches darted between thistles. Everything was alive, more alive than it had been in years. She remembered the silence of her old grass, the bland green square that used to sit there, trimmed weekly to death. Now, her lawn was an ecosystem. It pulsed with purpose, and something else. She didn't tell anyone about the dream she'd had the night before, the one where her grass moved like ocean waves and whispered her name, or how, when she touched the soil yesterday, it had felt warm. Not from the sun, but from within. She walked to the edge of her property, where a wooden sign once reading, "Monarch Meadow," stood in crooked defiance of HOA rules. The board had told her to take it down weeks ago, citing uniform signage violations. She had refused. A rustling behind her. "Eleanor," she turned sharply. Chairman Derek Sloan stood across the property line, wearing his usual white polo and blue-tinted visor, like he was ready for a tennis match that never came. Clipboard clutched. Sunglasses mirrored her expression. "Got the letter?" he asked, already knowing. Eleanor nodded. "I did. You understand this isn't personal. Just maintaining standards." She glanced back at the swaying grass. The monarch had taken flight again, circling lazily above her head. "It is personal when your standards punish life." Derek sighed like he was disappointed in a child. "Wild lawns attract pests, Eleanor. Weeds spread. Property values drop. You want bees? Start a hive like a normal person." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "They're not pests. They're protectors." Derek's eyebrow twitched. "Excuse me," but Eleanor just smiled. Slow and strange, and walked back into the grass, letting it close behind her like a curtain. The wind picked up. Derek flinched as a sudden gust sent petals flying across his polished loafers, and somewhere deep in the lawn, something hummed, low, ancient, and listening. That night, the humming returned. Eleanor lay awake beneath her quilt, the open window letting in the scent of sweetgrass and honeysuckle. The breeze outside had a rhythm, almost musical. It rose and fell like breath, like the land itself was breathing. Every now and then, the same whispering sound passed her ears. too faint to decipher, but too persistent to ignore. She couldn't sleep, not with that sound. By dawn, she was in her robe, kneeling at the far edge of her yard, with a trowel in hand. The grass here was tallest, nearly chest-high in places, and it grew in a spiral formation that she swore hadn't been there yesterday. Not matted, not windblown, arranged. Digging wasn't her plan, not really. But when she pressed the blade into the soil, the ground gave way far too easily. Like it wanted to be opened. Only 2 inches down, she struck something hard. She froze. It looked like stone, but not like anything she'd ever seen. Smooth, translucent, and faintly glowing with a soft, amber light. The pulse came next. A gentle thrum under her fingers, like a heartbeat. Then came the bees. A dozen of them, silent and slow, descended toward her in perfect formation. They did not sting. They did not land. They hovered in a perfect circle around the dug-up patch, forming a perimeter. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. One of them, a large bumblebee with a strange shimmer to its wings, moved forward and hovered directly in front of her face. For a brief second, it felt like communication. Not in words, not in images, but in emotion, urgency, respect, a warning, protect this. Then they were gone, vanishing into the sky as suddenly as they'd come. Eleanor sat back, hand trembling. She didn't know what she had uncovered. Fossil, artifact, seed. But she knew it mattered, and she knew someone would come for it. By mid-morning, someone did. Derek Sloan stood in her yard, uninvited, flanked by 2 HOA board members. His clipboard was gone. In its place, a stern-faced woman held a measuring device with a laser rangefinder. Eleanor opened her door to find them already trampling the edge of her milkweed. "We're conducting a compliance verification," Derek said, voice tight. "After yesterday's refusal to cooperate, we're initiating an escalation protocol." Eleanor stepped forward, fury in her veins. "You're trespassing." "Actually," he said, pointing toward the soil, "we're inspecting for non-permitted alterations to native landscaping. We received an anonymous tip that you've been digging." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Someone saw her. The other woman walked toward the spiral of grass where she'd dug earlier, but the hole was gone, completely covered, as though the earth had sewn itself shut overnight. No disturbance, no exposed soil, just tall grass swaying innocently. "That's impossible," she murmured. Derek frowned. "What? Nothing here, just weeds." They left 5 minutes later, confused, but smug. Eleanor waited until their SUV pulled away before walking back to the spiral. This time, she didn't need to dig. The grass parted gently as she approached, revealing the same amber glow, pulsing faintly beneath the soil. Eleanor knelt and whispered, "I'll protect you." A single butterfly landed on her arm, folding its wings. Behind her, the wind shifted, not randomly, but with force and direction, slamming her garden gate shut, as if sealing a pact. Somewhere deep beneath her yard, something stirred. 3 days after the visit, Eleanor noticed it. A small black dome, mounted atop the HOA clubhouse roof, aimed directly at her home. It hadn't been there before. And neither had the small blinking red light that pulsed all night like a mechanical heartbeat. Derek had installed surveillance. Officially, it was for neighborhood security. Unofficially, it was for her. She took her tea onto the porch, like always, acting unaware, but she could feel the lens watching her. Every movement she made in her garden, watering the milkweed, checking the bee boxes, brushing the edges of the spiral. It was all being recorded. She glanced once toward the dome and raised her mug in a mocking toast. They weren't just watching her. They were waiting for her to make a mistake. That evening, her suspicions were confirmed. She found her compost bin flipped over, its contents dumped and stomped. A child's swing she'd hung in a low tree branch was torn down. Her fence latch, once solid, now dangled loose, unbolted. But it was the message carved into the side of her raised planter that froze her cold. Cut it or we will. The carving was fresh. Eleanor stepped back, gripping her gardening gloves so tightly. Her fingers ached. She scanned the quiet neighborhood. Curtains twitched. Porch lights flicked off. Everyone was watching, and no one would admit it. By the next morning, she'd had enough. She brought out an old signal jammer, a leftover from her late husband's radio enthusiast days, and hooked it to a car battery under her porch. As soon as she flipped the switch, the red light on the clubhouse dome flickered, then died. Let them guess, but then something strange happened. Her phone buzzed, but no calls came through. The house lights flickered. Her garden lights turned on during the day, and then off again at dusk. Birds began gathering near her fence post, not resting, watching, and the bees, they were no longer just busy. They were organized. Each morning, they formed a tight spiral over her yard before dispersing to pollinate. One evening, she saw them forming hexagonal shapes mid-air. Another time, a cluster of them hovered in a direct line between her yard and Derek's house. Then came the footage. An anonymous email landed in her inbox with no subject line. Attached was a video, grainy and silent, but unmistakable. It showed Derek at 2:13 a.m., dressed in black and crouched near her fence line, holding something metallic. He was planting a motion sensor. Another clip showed him speaking heatedly with someone inside the clubhouse, gesturing at the camera feed. His lips moved, forming one clear phrase, "She's hiding something. And I'm gonna find out what." Eleanor stared at the screen, heart pounding. He wasn't just trying to find her, he was trying to expose her, or whatever he thought she was guarding. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the spiral of tall grass sway unnaturally under a wind that wasn't blowing. Fireflies blinked between the stalks in perfect, rhythmic patterns. Like a message, she whispered into the dark, "They're coming, aren't they?" The grass bent as though nodding. Suddenly, from the shadows at the edge of the yard, a raccoon sprinted across the spiral. It didn't make it halfway. A hum rose from the earth, and the creature froze mid-step. Just froze. Then turned, slowly, calmly, and walked away. Eleanor pressed her fingers to the window, breath fogging the glass. Whatever lived beneath her lawn wasn't just ancient, it was awake now. At 8 a.m. sharp, Eleanor heard it. Engines. 3 landscaping trucks rolled slowly into Hillgrove Estates, like tanks through enemy territory. Each one bore the HOA's freshly printed emblem, a leafy green crest with the words, "Preserving Neighborhood Perfection." The phrase had never sounded more sinister. Derek Sloan stepped out of the lead vehicle, wearing dark sunglasses and an ill-fitting suit, flanked by a group of uniformed workers, holding weed trimmers, gas mowers, and long rakes like weapons. He didn't bother knocking. Instead, he waved an official notice in the air, like a victory flag. "Emergency enforcement," he announced, his voice loud enough to carry down the street. "Per Section 7.1, Subsection C, we are authorized to bring your property into compliance ourselves." Eleanor stood barefoot on her porch. She didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She simply said, "You shouldn't be here." Derek ignored her. "Begin." The workers moved toward the yard. The spiral of wild grass stood tall and proud, the very symbol of defiance. And as the first mower revved up and roared forward, slicing into the outer edge of it, the wind stopped. dead calm. Then, a sound rose from the earth, not from the mower, not from the machines, from beneath, a deep vibrating hum, like thousands of wings flapping in perfect harmony. The workers hesitated. Then the swarm came, from the tall grass, from the flower beds, from the air, bees, butterflies, and insects Eleanor had never even seen before, erupted like a storm of gold, and black, and fire. They didn't scatter wildly. They moved with intent. A line of butterflies blocked the face of the lead worker. He swung at them instinctively, and immediately screamed. His gloves were ripped from his hands as bees surged up his arms. Another man threw down his trimmer and ran, swatting at the swarm that coated his back like armor. The mowers shut down one by one as their operators bolted for safety, chased by a precision storm of wings and stingers. Even Derek stumbled backward, brushing at his collar where something buzzed against his neck. He shouted into his phone, "Get them off! Get them off!" Eleanor stepped down into her yard, untouched. A single monarch landed on her shoulder. Dozens of bees circled her, but never touched her skin. "You brought this on yourself," she said calmly. "You knew I didn't grow this. I was chosen by it." Derek pointed a trembling hand. "This is a threat to public safety, then. Maybe the public should stop threatening nature." The HOA workers fled. The trucks reversed in a panic, one of them clipping a mailbox. By the time they were gone, Eleanor's yard looked untouched. Even the small grass Derek's men had mowed grew back as she watched, blades stretching up like waking fingers. The swarm slowly dispersed, returning to their homes. Petals, hives, nests tucked into tree bark. The neighborhood was silent. But later that evening, someone knocked. It was a woman Eleanor had never met. Middle-aged, glasses fogged from the humidity. She introduced herself as Dr. Mira Vance, a visiting ecologist with the university. "I've been watching your yard for weeks," she said, stepping carefully onto the grass, her hands respectful, empty. "But after today, I had to come in person." Eleanor said nothing, but the wind picked up softly as though granting permission. "I believe your land is the site of an old pollinator sanctuary," Mira continued, voice low, "one that was covered up when this community was built. And I believe it's waking up." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "It already has." They stood in silence as the grass rippled with unseen breath. Then, from the spiral center, a new bloom emerged, tall, violet, and glowing faintly under the moonlight. Neither of them spoke, but both knew this was only the beginning. Dr. Mira Vance knelt near the spiral center, flashlight in one hand, soil test probe in the other. She'd arrived just before sunrise. Her old Jeep parked crooked on the curb like she couldn't afford to waste a second. Eleanor met her, in silence, stepping barefoot into the dew-soaked grass, a mug of tea steaming in her hand. Mira waved the probe like a dowsing rod, frowning. "The electromagnetic readings are off the charts, and the soil here isn't behaving like regular Earth. It's responding." "Responding how?" Eleanor asked. "Like it's aware, watching us, choosing who gets too close." They both glanced toward the front gate. The area where the landscaper had tried to mow now looked untouched, wilder even. A cluster of new flowers bloomed there that neither woman could identify. They glowed, faintly blue at the edges, and butterflies perched on them. In still, silent communion, Mira reached into her satchel and pulled out a yellowed piece of folded paper. "I went to the county records office last night. Found something they buried. Under decades of zoning jargon." She unfolded the paper on Eleanor's porch table. It was a hand-drawn map from 1913. Across the top read, "Pollinator Pact. Charter of the Sworn Land. The original owner of this property was a beekeeper named Jonah Wilkes. Mira said, but he wasn't just raising bees. He was protecting an ancient ecosystem that predates this neighborhood by centuries. Eleanor stared at the spiral drawn on the map. Identical to the one in her yard. What do you mean sworn land? There's folklore about certain grounds being bound by nature itself. They say if the land accepts a guardian, the creatures within it will protect her, as long as she protects them. Jonah was one. You're another. Eleanor swallowed hard. And if I stop protecting them, the pact breaks, and everything turns against the trespassers. A knock interrupted them. This time it wasn't Derek. It was someone worse. Marla Givens, HOA board treasurer, and Derek's behind-the-scenes puppet master, stood at the gate with a leather folder clutched to her chest. Her high heels sank slightly in the soil, and she looked visibly disgusted by the lushness surrounding her. You've been served, she said crisply, handing over the folder. Formal notice of community lawsuit, public endangerment, unauthorized, land modifications, willful disruption of HOA ordinances. Eleanor opened it. Inside were a dozen signatures from her neighbors. Some she'd baked cookies for. Some who'd complimented her wildflowers just last week. Your property has been classified a biohazard, Marla added. If you refuse to comply, we'll petition the city for removal. You can't remove what's beneath the ground, Eleanor said coldly. Marla raised a brow. Watch us. And then, with no warning, Marla plucked a flower from the edge of the spiral and crushed it between her fingers. Everything changed. The air grew heavy. The bees rose from the hive en masse, not buzzing, but shuddering. The spiral grass twisted inward slightly. Even Mira took a step back. I wouldn't have done that, she whispered. Marla snorted. It's a weed. You'll thank me later. But, even as she turned to leave, a faint red welt began to rise on her wrist. Then another, and another. She scratched it absently, then more frantically. Mira leaned in. You need to leave, now. Marla scoffed. From this joke of a jungle, gladly, but as she walked away, something unseen followed. That night, Eleanor woke to the sound of sirens. She stood at her window and watched as an ambulance parked outside Marla Givens' house. Paramedics rushed inside. One of them exited moments later. Eyes wide, breath shallow, stings, he muttered. Hundreds of stings, but no bees. Eleanor turned to the spiral. It pulsed with quiet light. The pact had answered. By morning, Hillgrove Estates buzzed, not with insects, but with whispers. Everyone had heard what happened to Marla Givens. The official statement said it was an allergic reaction. Unfortunate, but unrelated to the property dispute. Derek claimed, but the neighbors didn't believe it. They saw the look in the paramedic's eyes. They saw the way her skin had welted, as if the air itself had turned against her. And they saw the cameras. Someone, no one knew who, had posted night footage online of the swarm descending silently around Marla's front lawn. No stings, no attacks, just a hovering mass, watching. The video was taken down within hours, but not before it spread. That afternoon, Eleanor's mailbox overflowed with anonymous letters. Some were supportive. Thank you for standing up to them. Others were afraid. Please don't make it worse. But a few were threatening. We know what you're hiding. She didn't flinch. Instead, Eleanor invited Dr. Vance back. This time, Mira didn't come alone. She brought a rolled canvas map, a portable sensor kit, and a thin-lipped man in wireframe glasses named Olin, a linguist, oddly enough. He specializes in pre-colonial sigil systems. Mira explained. And you might want to see what's beneath your house. Eleanor blinked. My house. They led her down to the crawl space under her floorboards. There, carved into the stone foundation, was a ring of glyphs. Aged, glowing faintly like bioluminescent veins. Olin traced them slowly with his hand and murmured, "It's a pack marker. Ancient. You're not the first protector. You're just the first in a long time." Eleanor knelt. "What does it say?" "It's not words," he said. "It's intention. One of balance. Nature grants sanctuary. And in return, the guardian must shield it from those who would corrupt or control." Outside, the wind shifted. The air grew dense. Derek had returned, with lawyers, 2 black sedans, and a police cruiser idled by the curb. Derek stood beside a city official from zoning enforcement, smiling like a man who'd finally found a loophole to crush an enemy. "We've secured a temporary injunction," he said, waving a stamped document. "City approval, court order. Tomorrow morning, we're removing the landscaping and treating the soil with a neutralizer compound." Eleanor stepped forward, no fear in her voice. "And if the land doesn't let you?" Derek didn't blink. "Then we'll bulldoze it." The threat hung like smog. That night, the spiral burned gold under the moon. Not with fire, but with energy. A quiet pulsing light that swam through the stalks and rippled the petals of every blooming flower. The bees hummed in synchronized waves. Even the ants moved in ordered rings. Eleanor sat alone on the porch, hands in her lap, watching, listening. Then she stood. She marched to the edge of her yard, took out a long wooden stake, and planted it firmly into the ground. Atop it, she nailed an old weathered sign Jonah Wilkes once hung generations ago, now restored and repainted by her hand. Sanctuary grounds. No trespassing by order of the sworn. And beneath it, a line she added herself. "You can't evict what's older than you." From the shadows, neighbors watched. Some turned away, but others stepped forward, quietly, subtly, placing potted milkweed near their gates, hanging seat bells from porches, opening windows instead of running air conditioners. They weren't just residents anymore. They were awakening. Inside Eleanor's house, the lights dimmed. The glyphs beneath the floor pulsed. And outside, the spiral opened. Like a breathing lungs, the land was choosing its side, and it would not forget. The morning of the destruction order arrived with unnatural stillness. No birds sang. No bees buzzed. The spiral stood tall and silent, blades of grass frozen mid-sway, like they were holding their breath. By 7 a.m., the HOA convoy rolled in. 3 flatbed trucks, 2 bulldozers, and a city soil treatment rig lined the curb like an armored siege column. At the head of it all, Derek Sloan stepped down in a bright orange vest, clipboard in hand, flanked by contractors and 2 uniformed deputies. "Today we restore compliance," he declared, to no one in particular. The first bulldozer roared to life. Its steel treads crushed the curb's edge as it rolled toward Eleanor's yard. People peeked from windows, some trembling, others holding phones, live streaming. Eleanor stood barefoot in the center of the spiral. She didn't move. Dr. Vance stood beside her, holding a slim tablet, streaming data. "This isn't just dirt," she muttered. "The electromagnetic field is expanding, reacting. It's waking up," Eleanor whispered. "It knows." The bulldozer entered the yard. Immediately the ground shivered. Not violently, but intentionally, like a muscle twitching before a strike. The driver laughed nervously and kept going, until the engine coughed, stalled, died. He cursed, twisting the ignition. The second bulldozer moved in. This time the grass in front of it twisted. Not just bent, twisted. like rope coiling around its treads. The machine lurched, tilted, and the front end slammed down into a sudden, inexplicable ditch. The operator bailed out, shouting, "Ground just caved under me!" Derek turned red. "Cut the spiral. I want it dug out. Now!" The workers hesitated. One of them, a younger man, stepped forward with a weed trimmer. He made it 3 steps into the spiral, before a high-pitched whine filled the air. Bees. Thousands. Not stinging. Not swarming. Just hovering between him and the grass, forming a wall. Behind them, butterflies fluttered in geometric formations. Moths swirled overhead like sentries. The spiral glowed faintly gold and violet beneath their wings. "I'm not going in there," the man said, dropping his trimmer and backing away. Another worker tried to circle the spiral. The grass at his feet erupted, not violently, but decisively. Thick vines emerged from the soil, coiling around his ankles, not hurting him, just holding him still. "Help!" he cried, panicked. "It's got me. It's..." Suddenly, he was released. He scrambled out of the yard and didn't look back. Derek screamed, "I'll do it myself!" He stormed forward, clipboard in one hand, machete in the other, and swung wildly at the edge of the spiral. "I've had enough of this hippie nonsense. You think you can make a joke of this neighborhood? You think a few flowers can stop me?" He stepped into the spiral, and the spiral closed, not with vines, not with bees, with silence. The sound vanished. The air stilled. The grass shifted around Derek, closing behind him like a mouth sealing shut. The only thing visible was the top of his clipboard, still clutched tightly in one white-knuckled hand, now trembling. Then, nothing. No screams. No movement. No sound. Just silence. 10 full seconds passed. Then, the spiral opened. Derek stumbled out, pale, covered in pollen and trembling. He dropped the machete, dropped the clipboard, fell to his knees. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't touch it again. It's not just a garden. It's watching." He didn't explain. He couldn't. He crawled out of the yard and was helped into a paramedic truck, face blank, eyes unfocused. That night, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Only 4 members showed up. 2 resigned immediately. The next morning, Eleanor found a letter slipped under her door. One sentence scrawled in careful handwriting. "They told me to protect it. Now I understand why." Jonah Wilkes, 1913. The handwriting wasn't Mira's. It wasn't Olin's. It wasn't even hers. The spiral had begun to speak. 3 nights after the incident, Hillgrove was quieter than ever. No more trucks. No more bulldozers. No more Derek Sloan. The HOA's emergency newsletter had described his sudden resignation and deep need for rest. But no one missed the part where he left town at 3 a.m., pale-faced and muttering about eyes in the flowers. Eleanor hadn't left her porch in days. Not out of fear, but reverence. The spiral had changed. It no longer looked like overgrown grass. Now it shimmered faintly, each blade moving like it was part of a larger being. The center had become something else entirely, a patch of pulsing violet earth that seemed to breathe with the wind. Dr. Vance came by with Olin, both carrying equipment and more questions than answers. "There's language in the pollen," Mira whispered. "Some kind of bioelectric signature encoded in the nectar. The bees are messengers, and this field is a transmitter." Olin ran a scanner over the spiral. The screen lit up in a fractal pattern. Lines, symbols, blooming like petals. Then something unexpected happened. The scanner died. No warning. Just blinked off and wouldn't restart. And in its place, a sound from beneath the spiral. A voice, not quite human. not quite insect. It was low and ancient, vibrating through their bones. Eleanor stepped forward. She didn't understand the words, but she felt the message. Choose. And the moment she did, the earth opened at her feet, not as a chasm, but like a doorway unfolding. Below, glowing roots curled like veins of light through tunnels of dark, living earth. At the center of it all, a wooden pedestal, gnarled and entwined with vines, pulsed with a dull blue glow. An old book sat atop it, covered in moss, alive. Mira gasped, "That's not a book, that's a seed vault." Eleanor descended into the spiral. With each step, memory surged into her mind. Visions, not hers. Jonah Wilkes, his wife, their warnings, their pact. She saw the moment they swore the oath, cutting fingers and feeding the soil. She saw them fight off developers in 1932, saw Jonah buried beneath this very earth, bones entwined with roots. Body accepted by the spiral in full, this place wasn't just a sanctuary. It was conscious, and it had chosen Eleanor as its next voice. She reached the pedestal and placed her hand on the vault. The roots responded, curling softly around her wrist, not holding her back, but welcoming her touch. The vault cracked open. Inside, seeds. Thousands. Glowing, vibrating, humming like miniature heartbeats. And beneath them, a simple wooden plaque, carved by hand. When they try to tame what's wild, remind them the wild remembers. Suddenly, above ground, the spiral began to bloom in ways no one had seen before. Plants not native to any biome in the region rose in seconds. Hummingbirds arrived from nowhere. The air shifted, not just in Eleanor's yard. Across Hillgrove, every lawn that had joined her in silent resistance bloomed. Even fences twisted slightly to make space for vines. Nature had made its decision. When Eleanor returned to the surface, Mira simply stared. "You bonded with it," she said, voice trembling. Eleanor nodded. "It gave me its name," she said softly. "It's not just the spiral, it's Remembria, the memory of untouched balance." Over the following weeks, the HOA lost its grip. A referendum was held. Restrictions on lawns were lifted. Eleanor's yard was declared a protected habitat by the city. What began as a fine for tall grass ended as a movement. Bees thrived. Butterflies spread. People walked barefoot again. And Eleanor, she wrote Jonah's story, her story, and Remembria's into a book. The final page read, "You can plant flowers, or you can plant fear, but only one will bloom when you're gone." And with that, the roots of resistance grew into legend.